So I've gone through and I've ranked the WCW and the WWF games. Now I wanted to do a list for all the non-company games. These are all the wrestling games on the Game Boy, NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, and PS1 that I've played, and they don't include any imports because I just don't have the time for that, and I don't really own any of them. I also left the ECW games off because I just have no idea what to do with those, and I don't really feel like playing them again. So we start off with Ring Rage on the Game Boy, and this is a bad port of a largely forgettable arcade game. Ring Rage is barely a wrestling game. It's really just not very good at all. The graphics aren't good. There are several game modes, but there really aren't, because you're really just doing the same thing. The controls and the graphics are just awful. There's very little to this game, even for a Game Boy game. I wasn't sure what to expect when I started playing this one, and when I finally sat down to play it, I was very disappointed just because of how terrible the cage and the chain matches are, and I was expecting those to be different, but really they're just the exact same thing. So you really only have the regular matches and then a cage and a chain match. There really isn't much to this. It's just a bad game. This is a game that I probably would have enjoyed more when I was a kid than I do now. It's just not very much fun. After some more consideration, when I went back to play it for this, I thought it was okay, but it is still the worst of the NES games, as far as wrestling goes. When I compared it to the other wrestling games, I just thought the graphics were a little bit, bad when I looked at the other ones. The gameplay really isn't all that great. I think it's probably better than WWF WrestleMania, but that's not really saying a whole lot. It's one of the games that I just did not enjoy very much. Data East unleashed this lousy port of an arcade game on an unsuspecting population back in the late 1980s. It's really a frustrating game to play now. Tag Team Wrestling has some good things going for it. I like the graphics, and that's really about it. The gameplay is really rough, mostly because of the way it has you do the moves. You go into a lockup, and then you need to press the B button anywhere from 1 to 7 times in order to do a move. Same thing happens when you go outside the ring, but at least there's a different set of moves that don't require the ring ropes. That sort of makes sense. It also has a very small roster of characters. It's just 2 tag teams, and you play each other ad nauseum until you eventually turn this off and move on to something better. There's really not too much else to say here. It's not a good port of a decent but forgettable arcade game. When I first played the Simpsons wrestling game, I thought it was one of the worst wrestling games on the PS1, and then I played all of the other ones and I realized this isn't that bad. It's a pretty decent arcade experience. It's got fun characters if you're into the Simpsons. The graphics aren't, atrocious. It's just a game that I didn't really enjoy very much because it's pretty cheap. The moves and controls are pretty easy to learn. I do like the way it did some of this stuff, and it does have a lot of unlockable characters and cheat codes that you can use, so that's kind of fun. But just the overall cheapness of this game, in that the enemies just magically beat the shit out of you in some stages, that's something that I didn't like all that much. Overall, it's okay, but it's not anything that I'm trying to get back to play or excited about. This game, along with Pro Wrestling and Hell Wrestling, can easily be swapped around for me. There is a lot more going on in Tecmo World Wrestling than the other two, but they're all pretty close, and they're all really fun to play. I put them in this order just because of how much I enjoyed them. So Tecmo World Wrestling has a great roster, the gameplay is excellent, and I really enjoy the graphics. There's an element of goofiness to this one that you don't see in some of the other wrestling games on this list, especially with the announcer giving you a play-by-play. I just really enjoyed that. It was pretty cool. The only bad thing about this game is the limited number of game modes, which is a problem for most of the NES and Game Boy games, as well as some of the Super Nintendo and Genesis games as well. While the single-player mode is excellent, it comes close to having a story mode as well, but overall it just lacks a lot of what the other games have. HAL Wrestling was my favorite wrestling game on the Game Boy. Playing this reminded me of pro wrestling on the NES, and there's a really good reason for that. This game is part of the Fire Pro Wrestling series, and it was one of really the only options for people in North America to try out this series, aside from, importing games from Japan back in the 90s. Playing this game and pro wrestling makes me wish we had gotten ports of the Fire Pro series instead of all the LJN published games. Out of all the wrestling games on the Game Boy, this is the one that I had the most fun with. There are minor issues with it, but overall, it's a really fun experience. Pro Wrestling was my favorite game on the NES as far as wrestling games went. You can easily argue that Tecmo World Wrestling is better, and I wouldn't necessarily argue with that. I just had more fun with this game than I did with that one. I like the roster here, the moves look really great, and for an early NES game, I think it's got a lot going on. You have special moves, you've got finishers. It's just a really fun game to play. While there is no story mode and limited gameplay, there is enough here to really elevate it over the other games on the NES and also on the Game Boy. As far as the story mode, that is one thing that I would have liked to see here, because you're just chasing a championship, and once you get it, that's kind of the end of what's going on. Then you're just defending it. So, yeah, there's not a whole lot as far as, depth with this game, but it's still a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it more than the other games on this list. Natsume Championship Wrestling was kind of a hard game for me to rank on this list. It is better in many ways than Hammerlock Wrestling and Saturday Night Slam Masters, but I didn't like the control scheme as much as I did on those games. I think the graphics on this one are better than in those two, but I had more fun with the other two games than I did with this one. This has a lot going for it, though. The graphics are great, the roster is pretty fun, there's a lot of game modes in it. The wrestlers all look pretty different, they've got unique moves, and the controls are pretty good for what it is. The problem I had, or at least the biggest problem I had, was difficulty. There's just something about the control scheme that was holding it back for me. It took a while for me to just get a handle on it, and I felt that it wasn't as easy to learn as Hammerlock Wrestling or Saturday Night Slam Masters. I like Hammerlock Wrestling more than most people, from what it seems. As much as I like it, it does have a few problems. I just had more fun with it than I did with Natsume Championship Wrestling. I really like the graphics in this, and I like the presentation. I think having 2/3 of the screen dedicated to cutscenes for the moves is pretty cool. It can take a while to get used to, but it's something that I really enjoyed with this game just for how unique it was. The overall gameplay is fairly simple. You don't have the complex control schemes that you do in Natsume Championship Wrestling, but you do have a decent number of game modes, the roster is really cool, and I enjoyed the unique presentation of this game. I just thought it was a lot of fun, even if it can be a little kind of jarring to play a game like this. Power Move Pro Wrestling is an awesome game, and I wish I had heard about it when I was a kid. The first time I even found out about this game was about 2 or 3 years ago when I started going through all the wrestling games on the different consoles. This was a reskin of a Japanese wrestling game, and the publisher didn't think that it would sell in the US with either, I can't remember if it was All Japan or New Japan Pro Wrestling attached to it. So they stripped that out, and we got this. It's a game that, has no story, but the manual tries to give you a reason for what each wrestler is doing. It has very good controls. It's, got dated graphics, but I don't think they're too much worse than some of the early PS1 games or the games on the N64. It is a fun game to play, and that's really what carried it through this. Saturday Night Slam Masters on the Sega Genesis is an excellent game, but I just liked what was done with the Super Nintendo game a little bit more. With the Sega Genesis version, the graphics are great, the roster is still really great, it's very easy to learn, the controls are simple, the presentation is awesome, I love the graphics, I really love the game modes in this, I love everything about it, but I had more fun with the Super Nintendo version, and that's the only reason why I put that one ahead of this. Saturday Night Slam Masters on the Super Nintendo is another awesome game. This one was the best of the other games on this list, and it managed to beat out the Sega Genesis version just simply because I had more fun with it. At the end of the day, it was like trying to pick my favorite flavor of ice cream. They're all great, and at the end of the day, you're still eating ice cream, you just need to decide which one you like more. In this one, you go on a world tour, beating up different wrestlers. It's so much fun. It's very much, just an arcade experience that Capcom was very good at delivering. You do have a few references to the Final Fight series in this, which, makes a lot of sense since Mayor Mike Hagar is in here. So, yeah, it's just a really great game. Awesome graphics, great controls, really fun to play. Going back to play these games, it was a lot of fun. My opinions on most of them really haven't changed too much since I reviewed them over the last few years. I really didn't remember what I thought about a few of the NES games, so I may have been a little bit too harsh with them when I first reviewed them, and now I kind of think about them a little bit differently. They still aren't the best, but they're fun for what they are, and they were most likely more fun back when they first were released. I reviewed most of these games before I really started looking at the reviews that they got back when they were released. Some of them didn't get reviews just because of the console that they were released on or the time that they were released. And yeah, they were a little bit harder to go back and find. This is just a nice way to kind of round out the wrestling game reviews that I've been doing. Just getting all of the non-WWF, non-ECW, and just skipping over the ECW games to put together this short list. There is really only one game on here that's terrible that I would never want to go back and play, and that's Ring Rage. The others would be more fun to go back and play with someone else. They're all, or at least most of them, are very good. I just happen to enjoy a few of them more than probably most people would. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.